The screen lit up with scenes that had become famous to millions of people around the world. Alien councils shaking in front of human diplomats who spoke with quiet authority, starships powered by impossible human determination pushing through barriers that should have destroyed them, and warriors crying at acts of unexpected kindness that turned enemies into friends. These were GalacticPrime's most popular stories, told by smooth AI voices that never made mistakes, never paused at the wrong time, and never broke character, even when things got really emotional. The AI voice said, "Humanity doesn't just survive, we thrive where others would fall," perfectly over a montage of the best fictional achievements of humanity. The voiceover was perfect, the pacing was perfect, and the emotional beats came in at just the right time. The number of views in the corner of the screen kept going up. 2.3 million, 2.4 million, 2.5 million. As people all over the world read these stories about exceptional people in the vast, uncaring darkness of space, the numbers kept going up, just like a rocket reaching escape velocity. Every story seemed to have a deeper impact than the last, every character seemed more memorable, and every Space Orc moment, when humanity's unique traits shocked the galactic community, seemed to have a bigger effect. Since Galactic Prime started up 18 months ago, millions of people have read these stories. There were so many positive comments that they seemed to go on and on. This made groups of fans who were very passionate about the stories and shared how they had affected them. Another hit. HFY at its best. Who's chopping onions in here? This is why I pay for it. Humanity, hell yes. I've heard this 3 times and cried every time. This channel knows what makes us human better than any other. By any measure, the engagement was off the charts. More than 90% of people who clicked on the link stayed to read the stories from start to finish. The community was very involved, making fan art, writing sequels, and talking about what it means for people to be empathetic in a cold universe. There was so much content, with 3 new stories coming out every week, and each one was just as good as the last, which is what made Galactic Prime so popular. Industry experts were amazed by how consistent it was. Other AI-based content channels had quality that changed a lot. Some stories were great, while others were hard to understand. Galactic Prime kept up a standard that seemed almost otherworldly. Competitors tried to copy the formula by giving their AIs similar prompts about human ingenuity and alien encounters, but their stories didn't work. Galactic Prime was different in some way, but no one could put their finger on it. But behind the smooth AI narration and the fast-paced content production that seemed to break the rules of traditional storytelling, there was a question in the minds of both curious viewers and industry experts. How did these stories always hit so hard? How did they find the right mix of action and emotion, of big cosmic stakes that affected galaxies and small, personal moments that felt real? How did every Space Orc moment, those times when humanity's unique traits shocked the galaxy, hit with such deadly accuracy that people said they got chills, cried, or sat in stunned silence? The technical quality was good, but it didn't fully explain what was going on. The AI narration was smooth, but other channels could also use the same voice synthesis technology. Yes, the plots were well structured, but the plots alone didn't explain the emotional devastation that viewers said they felt. Yes, the pacing was great, but perfect pacing without soul was just good craftsmanship. There was more. Something that turned these stories from good AI-generated content into stories that really touched people, changed how they thought about people, gave them hope during hard times, and made them proud to be human even when reading about fictional people in impossible situations. Most people didn't expect the answer to be what it was. It wasn't a more advanced algorithm that had been trained on a bigger dataset. It wasn't a secret way to train AI that used old science fiction books that most people don't know about. Not even a bigger group of AI experts fine-tuning the parameters and changing the weights to get the most emotional effect. The answer was both easier and deeper than anyone thought it would be. People think it's all automated, said Marcus Chin, leaning back in his ergonomic chair at Galactic Prime headquarters. The modest 3-story office building in Portland didn't look like the high-tech facility people imagined when they thought about cutting-edge AI companies. They think we just press a button, put in some information about human creativity and alien encounters, maybe change a few settings for emotional intensity, and then a perfect story comes out that is ready to be told and uploaded. If only it were that easy. If only it were that simple. I'd sleep a lot more. Marcus was 42 years old. His temples were getting grayer and more noticeable over the past 2 years, and he always wore reading glasses on his nose. He looked more like a literature professor at a small liberal arts college than someone who was on the cutting edge of AI-assisted content creation. His coffee mug said, "Writer's block, when your imaginary friends won't talk to you." It was a gift from his 17-year-old daughter, who had inherited his love of storytelling but showed it through elaborate Dungeons and Dragons campaigns. The office around him showed this strange mix of old and new. The desk was made of solid oak and had coffee rings on it from years of use, but the monitors showed the latest AI interfaces. Next to the mechanical keyboard, which made a satisfying clacking sound, was a fountain pen and a leather-bound notebook full of handwritten notes. The walls had framed concept art from well-known stories, but the shelves had real books with worn covers and creased spines from being read many times. People who thought about how AI-generated stories were made thought they were boring and machine-like. The truth was much more interesting and human. There was a person behind every story that made people cry real tears, every moment that made people shiver and get goosebumps, and every perfectly timed emotional beat that stayed in people's minds long after the video ended. Not just any person, but someone who had spent their whole adult life trying to figure out what made stories work at a basic level, what made characters feel real enough to care about, and what made moments matter in ways that went beyond just being entertaining. Marcus said, "Let me show you something." He turned his chair to face his monitors with the ease of someone who had been doing this for 10 hours a day for 10 years. "This is what people think we do. This is the story." He pulled up a flowchart that had been going around on social media for the past month. It had been shared tens of thousands of times and sparked heated debates in comment sections all over the internet. The chart said it had insider information that would show GalacticPrime's automated story factory, but it was just a guess. The flowchart says that AI wrote full stories from simple prompts, another AI system read them with perfect emotional inflection, and a third AI even looked at viewer comments to come up with the next story based on what people wanted to see. There were no people involved, only machines talking to each other and making content for people who didn't know they were being fed algorithmic slop. "This went viral last month," Marcus said with a tired smile that made it clear he had seen this happen before. "We got thousands of comments saying that we had shown that storytelling was dead, that human creativity was no longer useful, that the machines had won, and that there was no point in human writers even trying anymore." Some people were really excited about it because they thought it was progress, efficiency, and the future of entertainment. Some people were really angry or very sad, as if we had crossed a line and taken away something sacred. People who commented on the viral post were happy or sad. "This is the future and it's beautiful," wrote one fan. Another person said, "We've killed art and called it progress." A practical person said, "Who cares who writes it if it's good?" A writer said, "I care. I care a lot." Marcus had read all of them. Every comment. He wanted to answer, set the record straight, and tell the truth about what really happened behind the scenes. GalacticPrime's marketing team, on the other hand, told them not to do it. They had said, "Let them think what they want. Being mysterious is good for engagement." Marcus had disagreed then and still did now. He closed the flowchart and opened something else, a document that took up his whole screen. It had handwritten notes that had been scanned and digitally annotated, sketches of character relationships, paragraphs that had been crossed out and covered in red ink, and margin comments in 3 different colors to show how far along he was in the revision process. The paper was messy and chaotic, full of signs of people struggling with narrative issues. "This is what we really do," Marcus said quietly, and his voice had a heaviness that made it clear how important what he was about to say was. "This is the truth behind every story you've loved, every moment that moved you, and every character you've connected with. And today I'm going to show you everything. I'm going to pull back the curtain all the way, not because our marketing team thinks it's a good idea, they definitely don't, but because I think people deserve to know the truth about how creative people are in an age of AI." The camera slowly moved across his desk, showing the truth behind GalacticPrime's record-breaking success in ways that went against everything the viral flowchart said. There weren't rows of servers and technicians watching outputs in a clean AI lab. There were a lot of things in this storyteller's workshop that were personal and messy. This is where the real magic happened, where silicon met soul and algorithms became art. "You've heard the AI voices," Marcus said, looking straight at the camera. "You've seen the big stories, the plots that move at just the right speed, and the space orc moments that make you shiver and feel proud to be human. But have you ever thought about what makes a GalacticPrime story more than just a fun read? What makes you feel that classic HFY feeling that stays with you long after the story is over? Even though that viral flowchart said so, it's not just algorithms at work. There's a secret ingredient, a human touch that carefully shapes every emotional beat and plot twist in ways that AI alone could never do." He stopped for a moment to let that sink in, then smiled more genuinely. "The story of how these stories are made is about to change everything you thought you knew about AI creativity, and the enduring power of the human touch in an increasingly automated world. Because here's the truth that nobody seems to want to acknowledge. AI is an incredible tool, perhaps the most powerful creative tool ever developed. But it's still just a tool. And no matter how advanced the tools are, they still need a craftsman's hand to make something that really matters. Marcus turned back to his monitors and his fingers were already moving toward the keyboard, ready to show exactly what he meant. Let me show you how a Galactic Prime story really starts. People were surprised to learn that Marcus Chen wasn't a programmer at Galactic Prime. He had never written a line of code in his life, and he only knew how the AI systems worked on a technical level because he used them every day. He wasn't an expert in AI, hadn't studied machine learning, neural networks, or any of the computational linguistics that made modern language models possible, and couldn't explain the math behind transformer architectures beyond the most basic, vague ideas he picked up from working with the technical team. Marcus was a storyteller, and that's what he had always been. He had been writing stories for 20 years before Galactic Prime even existed. He learned his craft through trial and error, rejection and acceptance, failure and success. He wrote novels that never sold, short stories that won awards, screenplays that almost got made, and more words that were deleted than most people write in their whole lives. And that was exactly why he was irreplaceable in Galactic Prime's operation. He had years of practice that gave him a deep understanding of how to write stories. His workspace told that story in ways that words couldn't fully capture, through the small things that made up a creative life lived on purpose. There were shelves on the walls that were sagging under the weight of worn paperbacks that had been collected over the years. These included classic science fiction books by Asimov, Clarke, and Heinlein, whose covers had faded and pages had yellowed, as well as modern works by Liu Cixin, Becky Chambers, and dozens of other authors. Long fantasy stories. Fiction that is literary. Even mysteries and love stories. Marcus thought that a good storyteller should know all kinds of stories, what worked in different genres, and what was common to all human stories. The spines were creased and the pages were dog-eared to show important parts of the books that had been read many times. Many of them were filled with marginalia, like Marcus's handwritten notes from years ago that explained why a certain scene worked, how a character's arc changed, and where the emotional turning points happened. He had been studying how stories worked long before they became his job because he was so interested in how they worked on people's minds. There were layers of yellow, pink, and blue sticky notes all over his monitors. Each one had a piece of thought about a current project on it. Motivation unclear, dig deeper. What does she really want? Chance to call back? Too rushed, need some space. This conversation seems fake, people don't talk like this. Where's the truth in my feelings? The notes overlapped, making a mosaic of the editorial process that never really stopped, even when Marcus wasn't at his desk. A whiteboard took up most of one wall. It had character arcs drawn in 3 different colors with lines connecting them that looked like a conspiracy theorist's vision board. Red lines showed how characters' emotions changed over the course of the story, showing where they started and where they needed to end up to feel like their arc was complete. Blue lines showed how the plot moved forward by showing the outside events that moved the story along. Green lines showed how the stories were connected thematically, or how they had deeper meanings that made them more than just fun to read. In the middle of this web, in Marcus's messy handwriting that slanted to the right, was a question he asked himself every day, sometimes every hour. Why does this moment matter? It was the most important question that set good storytelling apart from truly powerful stories. Any AI could come up with a plot point. Marcus's job was to make sure that plot point was emotionally important, that it had something to do with the character, and that it served the story's deeper purpose. This is where the magic happens, Marcus said, pointing to his 2 monitors with the pride of a craftsman showing off his tools to someone who would appreciate them. This is where AI output turns into art. When data turns into feelings. Where algorithms turn into stories that are important to people. His setup was very specific and he had to work on it for months to make sure it worked best for him. The left monitor showed raw AI-generated text in a clean, simple way, just black text on a white background with no formatting or other distractions. When he let the AI run, it kept scrolling and making thousands of words that made sense but didn't have any feeling. The right monitor showed his edited version glowing with track changes in Microsoft Word, comments in the margins, and restructured paragraphs that turned the raw material into a story that actually worked. Marcus said, "The AI is great at making content quickly." He showed me a recent draft of a story called The Harmony Protocol, which is about a human musician who stopped a war with an unexpected performance that crossed species barriers. It can write 10,000 words in the same amount of time it takes me to write 1 paragraph. It never gets tired, never gets writer's block, and never stares at a blank page wondering what to do next. Just makes things. And that's very useful. The AI's draft took up the whole left screen. It was a full story with a beginning, middle, and end. Characters had names and reasons for what they did. Things happened in a logical order. The story made sense. There was a fight between aliens and the human main character used music to stop it. In good shape. Good at what they do. Totally dead. But here's what AI doesn't get, Marcus said as he traced lines on the screen with his finger. It doesn't know why a moment needs to breathe. It doesn't know when a character should pause before speaking, even though that pause says more than words ever could. It doesn't know when silence is stronger than talking, when showing is better than telling, or when readers need time to think about what just happened before the story moves on. He took a red pen out of a cup that had dozens of them in different states of use. Some of them were worn down to nubs from hundreds of hours of editing. Yes, a real pen made of plastic and ink, a relic of editing by hand in a digital world. He still liked to mark up printed drafts for big changes. He thought that writing things down helped him think more clearly. Marcus started to mark up a printed copy of the AI's draft. His handwritten notes filled in the margins in small but readable letters. Slow down the pace to build tension here. Call back to Chapter 2, remind readers why she learned this song. Reader needs to feel his doubt, his fear that this won't work. What's at stake personally, not just politically? See this section? Marcus pointed to a climactic confrontation where the human musician, a woman named Lisa Morgan, performed for hostile alien delegates who'd gathered to declare war. AI generated a perfectly logical exchange. Lisa explains her plan to use music as a universal language. The aliens are skeptical. She performs. They're moved. Conflict resolved. Technically correct. Logically sound. He paused, letting the inadequacy of that description sink in. Completely boring. Utterly forgettable. Nobody would cry at this. Nobody would remember it a day later. Nobody would feel anything except maybe mild interest. He flipped to his revision on the right monitor, where the same scene had been transformed. Now watch what happens when we add fear, hope, and a history between Lisa and the lead alien delegate that the reader feels but doesn't need explicitly explained. Watch what happens when we make this personal, not just political. The difference was staggering and immediate. The AI version read like a diplomatic briefing, dry, informative, detached. Marcus's version read like two old colleagues standing at the edge of everything they'd built together, knowing one of them might not survive what came next, knowing that this moment would define both their legacies. In Marcus's version, Lisa's hands trembled as she lifted her violin. The alien delegate, Ambassador Thren, who'd been her friend before politics divided them, wouldn't meet her eyes. The weight of millions of lives pressed down on the moment. Lisa remembered teaching Thren's daughter a human lullaby years ago, before the tensions escalated, before friendship became impossible. She wondered if Thren remembered too. The performance itself wasn't just described, it was felt. Every note carried meaning. Every pause was intentional. The music became a conversation, an argument, a plea, a memory of better times. And when Thren finally met Lisa's eyes halfway through, when that single moment of connection happened, readers would understand that the war was already over. The rest was just formality. That's the difference, Marcus said softly, almost reverently. The AI wrote about a performance. I wrote about two people desperately trying to find their way back to friendship before it's too late. The AI wrote about music as a plot device. I wrote about music as the language we use when regular words fail us. He pulled up another example, this one from a story called The Garden Ship, about terraforming. The AI had generated a technically accurate description of environmental systems and biological processes. Marcus had transformed it into a story about a botanist named Grace Thompson who included plants from every species in the galaxy, creating not just a new world but a living symbol of unity that made alien visitors weep at the beauty of seeing their home flowers blooming light years away. The AI knows facts about plants, Marcus explained. I know what it feels like to see your grandmother's roses blooming in a new garden and remember her hands teaching you to prune them. The AI can describe biological processes. I can make you feel why someone would dedicate their life to growing things, to nurturing life, to creating beauty in the void. His workspace reflected this philosophy. Next to the monitor sat a small potted plant, a succulent that Marcus watered carefully and watched grow slowly. I keep this here to remind myself, he said, touching one thick leaf gently. Growth is slow. Care is patient. You can't rush something into being beautiful. The AI can generate a story in minutes. But making it actually matter? That takes time, attention, and understanding that only comes from lived experience. The wall behind his desk displayed framed artwork from GalacticPrime's most successful stories, fan creations sent by viewers who'd been moved enough to spend hours creating visual representations of moments that resonated with them. There was Lisa Morgan with her violin, Grace Thompson among alien flowers, Marcus Rodriguez standing before a warlord, and dozens more. Each one represented a story that had connected deeply enough to inspire creation in others. Every one of these, Marcus said, gesturing to the gallery, started as AI-generated text that I spent days or sometimes weeks transforming. The AI gave me the skeleton. I added the muscle, the organs, the beating heart. The AI gave me words. I gave those words meaning. His approach to editing was methodical but creative, structured but intuitive. He developed a process over the 18 months since Galactic Prime launched, refining it through hundreds of stories. First, he read the AI's complete draft without editing anything, just absorbing the raw material and taking notes on what worked and what didn't. He'd write questions in the margins. Why does this character care? What's really at stake? Where's the emotional truth? Second, he'd outline the emotional arc the story needed, not the plot arc. The AI usually got that right, but the feeling arc. How should readers feel at each point? Where should they be moved? Where should they be tense? Where should they find relief? Third, he'd revise in layers. First pass for structure and pacing. Second pass for character voice and motivation. Third pass for emotional beats and resonance. Fourth pass for line-level polish and rhythm. Sometimes there was a fifth pass, a sixth, as many as needed until the story felt right. People ask how I know when a story is done, Marcus said, pulling up a document that had gone through 7 major revisions. And the honest answer is, I feel it. After 20 years of doing this, I can feel when the pieces fit together, when the emotional beats land, when the characters feel real. It's not scientific. It's craft developed through practice. He opened his notebook, filled with handwritten observations about storytelling that he'd collected over years. Readers don't remember plots. They remember how you made them feel. The quietest times are often the most powerful. People's character isn't what they say, it's what they do when no one is watching. Manipulation is when you use emotion without setting it up. Boring is set up without emotion. Every scene has to do more than one thing: move the story forward, develop the character, and explore the theme. The AI couldn't follow these rules because they required more than just recognizing patterns. They needed judgment, intuition, and a deep understanding of human psychology. These were ideas that Marcus had learned over the years by reading and writing and figuring out what made stories work on a deeper level than just technique. Marcus said, "The AI is my assistant," and his hand rested on the keyboard like a pianist's hand on familiar keys. An incredibly skilled assistant who does the hard work of generation. But I'm the one who designs it. I decide what we're building and why it matters. I make sure that every story we tell has something important to say and that it really moves people in a way that they will remember. He looked at a picture on his desk of his 7-year-old daughter reading one of his early unpublished novels with full attention. She was now 17 and a storyteller herself, but he kept that picture to remind him of why he did this work. When my daughter read my stories, I could see her face change, Marcus said softly. I saw when the story stopped being words on a page and became real to her. I saw her eyes fill with tears when something sad happened, and I saw her smile when it ended happily. After she finished, I saw her sit in silence, thinking. That's what I'm going for with each edit. That moment when a story goes from being something to read to something to live. AI can't do that by itself. It needs a person who knows what it feels like to be moved by a story and what that gift means. He went back to his screens where a new AI draft was waiting for him. Let me show you exactly how I turn what the AI makes into something that matters. Let me show you something specific, Marcus said as he carefully opened a project file called The Last Mediator, as if he were handling something very important. This is going to show you exactly what I mean about how the human touch changes AI output. This story became one of our most popular pieces, with over 5 million views and thousands of comments. People told us it changed how they thought about courage and diplomacy. But the AI's first draft? It was completely forgettable. The main character in the story was James Rodriguez, a human diplomat who was trying to stop a war between 2 ancient alien empires, the crystalline Zentari and the hive-minded Keltrans. Both species had advanced civilizations that lasted for hundreds of years, huge armies and long-standing grudges that made war seem unavoidable. The galactic community had tried everything, from mediation to sanctions to appeals to reason. Nothing worked. War seemed unavoidable and billions of lives were at stake. After that, Earth sent James. Not because humans were very smart or advanced, The galaxy still saw Earth as a newcomer, having only been involved in interstellar politics for about a century. But humans had one trait that other species found strange and sometimes helpful: the ability to understand very different kinds of consciousness and find common ground where logic said there was none. The climax had what Galactic Prime fans called a Space Orc moment. This was the moment when humanity's unique traits shocked the galaxy and showed that human nature was stranger and stronger than alien observers had thought. These moments were the best parts of HFY Stories and what made millions of people sign up. Marcus opened the AI's first version of the fight scene and started playing the audio that had been made from the AI's text. The voiceover was smooth and professional, but the content below was empty. The Zentari warlord Kresh stood in front of the human diplomat, his crystal-like body reflecting the bright lights of the war room. "You will stand aside, human," Kresh said. "This conflict does not concern your primitive species." James Rodriguez straightened his shoulders. "I can't do that. War between your people will destroy this sector. Billions will die." "Then they die," Kresh said. "The Keltrans have done terrible things to my people that can't be forgiven. Justice demands that they be punished." James said calmly, "Justice and vengeance are not the same thing. You have the power to destroy them, but having power and using it wisely are two different things." Kresh's body flickered with anger. "How dare you tell me about wisdom? Your kind is barely civilized." "Maybe," James said. "But we've learned something in our short time in the galaxy. We've learned that strength isn't just being able to kill your enemies. Real strength is knowing when not to." The warlord stopped and thought about what the person had said. After a long time he stepped back and said, "Very well, human. I will think about your offer for peace talks." Marcus stopped the video and looked at the camera with a look that was both patient and a little hurt. He said, "Technically sound. The plot moves forward. The conflict resolves. James says smart things about peace and wisdom. Kresh changes his mind. The story goes on." He left that hanging for a while. Zero emotional impact. Completely generic. James could be any diplomat from any species saying diplomatic things. Kresh changes his mind for no good reason, he just does because the plot needs it. There's no moment where you feel James's fear or his courage. There's no sense of stakes. There's no reason for viewers to care. Marcus got out his notes for editing this scene. They were long, taking up 3 full pages of handwritten notes on analysis and revision plans. James isn't just logical, he's scared but trying to hide it. Show the sweat and the tremor in his voice that he can't control. He's a diplomat, not a warrior, and he shouldn't be in this room with a warlord who could kill him with a thought. But he is. What? Kresh needs more than just good argument, I'm convinced, to change. What does James know about Kresh that others don't? What makes this personal, not just political? The moment of change, this needs to be devastating. It needs to hit Kresh emotionally, not just convince him intellectually. What truth does James speak that Kresh can't deny? What makes Kresh see himself differently? Add some history. These two have met before? They have grown to respect each other even though they are on different sides? That makes this betrayal hurt more and the making up mean more. Find the human moment. What does James do that no other species would do? What surprises Kresh about how humans act? Marcus had worked on this one scene for 4 hours, adding layers that the AI couldn't even think of. He played his new version and the difference was clear right away. The scene didn't start with Kresh's demand, it started with James's hands shaking. He pressed them flat against the cold metal table so they wouldn't shake. The war room was huge, built for the tall, crystal-like bodies of Zentari warriors. James felt very small in comparison. Kresh stood in front of him, a 3-meter-tall piece of sharp crystal that could easily break James's head. Kresh said, "You shouldn't have come here, James Rodriguez." There was something in his voice that sounded like sadness but not quite. They were friends. They had been working out smaller problems for months before everything fell apart. "Go now, while I still remember that we used to work together." James's voice broke on the first word. He heard it happen, hated himself for it, but kept going anyway. "I can't." Pause. He took a breath. He steadied himself. "I can't, Kresh. You know I can't." "Then you'll watch your people burn alongside the Keltrans." Kresh's form blazed brighter, crystalline anger made visible. "James, they killed 17,000 of my people. 17,000. They blew up a colony ship full of kids. Kids. And you want me to forgive them? You want me to let them live?" Now James stood up, and the chair he was sitting in made a loud noise in the big room. He was still shaking, but he walked toward Kresh anyway, even though every instinct told him to run. He stopped just out of Kresh's reach. James said softly, "I'm not asking you to forgive them. His voice was steady now, but it took a lot of work to get there. What they did was awful. Unforgivable. You have every right to be angry. Then why are you here? James shut his eyes. They were wet when he opened them. I know what you're planning, Kresh. I've seen the fleet you've put together. And I know that if you attack, you'll not only destroy the Keltran military, but also their civilians and children, just like they did to yours. Justice demands. Justice? James's voice broke again, but this time it was because he was sad, not scared. You're going to kill kids and call it justice? You're going to become what you hate? That's not justice, Kresh. That's... He stopped looking for the right words. That's grief that has turned into genocide, and I won't let you do that to yourself. Kresh's shape flickered with confusion. To myself. Yes. James moved closer, now in range. Nothing could stop Kresh from killing him if he wanted to. You're my friend, Kresh. I've eaten with you, met your mate, and held your daughter's hand when she was scared of the human she'd never met before. Now I'm watching you turn into a monster because you're in pain. I won't let you do that even if it means I die. Be quiet. Long enough for James to hear his own heart beating. Kresh finally said, your species is crazy, but his voice had changed. Less harsh. Almost curious. Anyone with any sense would run away. You should be saving yourself, but instead you stand here, defenseless, and tell me, a warrior who could kill you in seconds, that you won't let me do something. James smiled, but tears were running down his face. I told you. You're my friend. Friends don't let friends kill a lot of people, even when they really want to, even when it seems like the right thing to do, and even when it's dangerous to get involved. I could kill you. I understand. This won't make me change my mind. James said, maybe not. But I had to try. That's what people do. We try even when it's dumb. We care even when it doesn't make sense. We put ourselves in the way of our friends' worst impulses, even when it's dangerous. Another long pause. Then Kresh's crystal-like body lost its brightness, and the rage that had been there turned into something else. Something is wrong. They killed my daughter, James, Kresh said in a low voice. My little Zara. She was 3 months old and on that colony ship. And James, who was small, weak, and completely powerless, did something that no other species in the galaxy would think to do. He stepped forward and wrapped his arms around 3 meters of razor-sharp alien crystal, hugging a being who could kill him by mistake. I know, James said to Kresh's sharp face. I know, and I'm so sorry. I can't imagine how much pain you're in. But Kresh, Zara wouldn't want you to do this. She wouldn't want you to kill kids like her to get back at her. You know she wouldn't. Kresh's whole body shook. James didn't realize right away that the warlord was crying. It was a sound that was so clear that human ears could barely hear it. Kresh's voice changed when he spoke again. Was more truthful. What do you want me to do? James, who was still holding his friend who might kill him, said, grieve, rage. Demand justice, real justice, not revenge. Let me help you find a way to make sure that the people who did this face the consequences, but innocent people don't die. Let me help you stay the person Zara knew, the good father, the just leader, and the friend I've come to care for. That day the war was over. Not because of logic or better arguments, but because one person wouldn't let his friend turn into a monster, even if it meant losing everything. Marcus stopped the playback and sat back in his chair. That's the moment, he said quietly. That's when people say they get chills, cry, or sit in stunned silence. It's the moment when James hugs a being made of real razor crystal because that's what friends do. It's the moment when Kresh realizes that this tiny, fragile human is willing to die to save not just billions of Keltrans, but Kresh's own soul. People were very upset in the comments for that episode. I literally got chills when I hugged them. Who hugs someone made of knives? This is why I love HFY. Not because humans are strong, but because we're crazy enough to care. James Rodriguez is my hero. That scene broke me. I just saw a space diplomat hug a crystal warrior, and now I'm crying at 2 a.m. Thanks for that. The part where Kresh says, your species is crazy, and James just smiles? Perfect. Marcus read through hundreds of comments that were all very similar. Each one was from someone who had been deeply moved by the scene. The AI came up with the basic plot. A human diplomat stops a war with an alien race. That's the skeleton. But everything that made it matter came from how people understand emotions, grief, friendship, and what real courage looks like when you're scared but do it anyway. He brought up his revision notes to show the exact changes. Added James's physical fear, the shaking and the cracked voice. This made him human and weak, not just a generic hero. Gave James and Kresh a history together. They were friends, not just political enemies. There were personal stakes, not just political ones. Zara was added. Kresh needed a specific personal loss. Not just thousands died, but, my daughter died and I held her broken body. Added the hug. This is the human moment, the thing only humans would do. Other species negotiate logically. Humans negotiate with their bodies, with their emotions, and even when it's dangerous, they find physical comfort. Kresh was even more confused. The aliens need to see how humans act and be amazed by it. Your species is insane, but in a way that shows wonder, not contempt. Kresh doesn't change his mind because of arguments. He changes because he can't kill someone who's hugging him and crying. James's vulnerable courage breaks through his grief. All of those changes came from what I knew about how people feel and act, Marcus said. The AI doesn't know what it's like to be so scared that you shake but still do something. It doesn't know what it's like to hug someone you love who is in pain. It doesn't know that the most brave times are often the most vulnerable times, not the most aggressive times. This time he used a story called The Mercy Protocol, about a human medic treating wounded enemies to make another before and after comparison. The AI version was very clinical. Treatment was given, wounds healed, and thanks were given. Marcus's version showed the medic's hands shaking with anger because these enemies had killed her squad. It also showed her internal struggle between her duty to heal and her desire for revenge, the moment she chose compassion over hatred, and how that made her feel. The AI wrote about how to get medical help, Marcus said. I wrote about how forgiveness is harder and braver than revenge. The AI wrote plot points and I wrote about how people really are. He showed a third example, The Last Song, about an aging human musician performing for a dying alien empress. AI version, performance given, empress moved, peaceful death. Marcus's version, the musician had lost her own daughter years ago and saw that grief reflected in the empress's family, chose a lullaby her daughter had loved, broke down crying midway through but kept playing because the empress needed it, and transformed a diplomatic gesture into genuine human compassion transcending species and politics. See the pattern? Marcus asked. The AI provides scenarios. I provide humanity. The AI generates events. I generate meaning. The AI creates content. I create connection. He pulled up analytics showing the performance difference between minimally edited AI stories and his fully revised ones. The numbers were stark. Engagement was triple, emotional comments were 10 times more common, and shares were dramatically higher for the stories where human touch was evident. This scene with James and Kresh? Marcus said, returning to The Last Mediator. It took me 4 hours to write. 4 hours for a 5-minute scene. The AI generated its version in about 30 seconds. But those 4 hours made the difference between content people scroll past and a story that genuinely moves them, that they remember and share and talk about with friends. He played the final moment one more time, the part where James hugged Kresh despite the danger, where the warlord realized this human valued their friendship over his own safety, where the entire war shifted because one person refused to let grief become genocide. The AI wrote the words, Marcus said as the audio played. But it took a human to make them matter. It took someone who understands what courage feels like, what friendship means, what it costs to choose compassion when rage would be easier. It took someone who knows that the most powerful moments in stories, and in life, are when we're most vulnerable, most honest, most willing to risk everything for something we believe in. He paused the audio at the exact moment of the hug. That's not an algorithm, Marcus said quietly. That's human understanding of human nature. That's the secret ingredient. That's what transforms silicon into soul. Now things get really interesting, Marcus said as he pulled up a spreadsheet that showed GalacticPrime's most popular stories from the last 18 months. Our audience doesn't just want people to be strong, smart, or better with technology. The data shows something else entirely. Look at this. The spreadsheet sorted stories by how engaged people were with them, which included views, completion rate, comments, shares, and what the team called emotional responses, which were comments that said the viewer cried, got chills, or was deeply moved. Marcus pointed out in yellow the clear pattern that the best stories all followed. Marcus said, the best stories don't have to do with humans winning by having better weapons, outsmarting aliens, or even solving impossible technical problems. They're about people being nice when it seems impossible to be nice. Being kind when no one else is. Choosing mercy when it would be easier and more satisfying to get revenge. This theme is way better than anything else. He showed an AI draft about human soldiers beating an invading fleet with better tactics and new weapons technology. There were a lot of action scenes in the story and the writing was good. There were ship battles, strategic moves, and smart use of limited resources against overwhelming odds. Victory in the military. The AI wrote an exciting war story in which people won. Look at what I changed, Marcus said as he scrolled down to see his new version of the same basic situation. The military victory stayed the same, human forces won the battle by using clever strategies. But Marcus had added an important scene that the AI would never have thought of. After the battle was over, Commander Jennifer Walsh told her medical teams to help enemy soldiers who were hurt and floating in the wreckage. The alien admiral who led the invasion was now bleeding and defeated in an escape pod. By human standards, he should have been killed. Instead, human medics pulled him on board, treated his wounds, and Commander Walsh made sure he was safe. The scene Marcus added showed that the alien admiral was completely confused. He said through the translation device, "You should kill me." He was confused by this break from normal military protocol. "I came to take over your colony. I killed 3,000 of your people. I'm a threat that needs to be gotten rid of by any reasonable standard." Jennifer, who was mourning the deaths of 3,000 people and was tired from fighting, looked at him and said something the AI would never have thought of. "You're right. You're dangerous. You did kill my people. And I want to hate you so much that it hurts. But we are not monsters, we are people. Even when they deserve it, we don't kill people who can't defend themselves. Even when it would be nice. We become what we're fighting against as soon as we do that." Marcus's response to the Admiral was very important. "Your kind is hard to understand. And scary in ways I didn't expect." "Good," Jennifer said. "Be afraid of our kindness. It's worse than our weapons." The story didn't end with just a military victory. The captured Admiral was also returned to his people, alive, treated, and changed forever by the experience of human mercy. 2 years later in the story, he became one of the strongest allies of humanity after seeing something that made him question everything he thought he knew about power and strength. Marcus said, "The AI thinks about problems and how to solve them. Win or lose. Either beat the enemy or lose. But what about people? We think about what victory costs, whether showing mercy takes more courage than getting revenge, and what kind of people we want to be after the fighting is over." He opened the comments for the story called The Mercy Doctrine. There were a lot of responses. "I'm crying at my desk." "The part where Jennifer gives water to the Admiral who killed her people? That's the best of what people can do. Be scared of our compassion, is something I want to get tattooed on my body. This is why HFY is so different. Not because we're strong but because we do the right thing even when it's hard. My grandfather was a prisoner of war during World War II. He said that the guards who were nice to him changed his life more than the ones who hurt him. This story tells the truth. AI would never write this because it doesn't know that the hardest victories are over ourselves." Marcus told story after story that followed the same pattern. AI made simple conflicts where humans always won because they were better. Marcus gave people the choice to be kind, even when they had every reason not to be. The Garden Ship is a simple terraforming story about how humans use advanced methods to change a dead world into a livable one. Marcus turned it into a story about botanist Grace Thompson, who insisted on including plants from every species in the galaxy. This made not only a new habitable world, but also a living memorial to the diversity of all civilizations. Aliens cried when they saw flowers from their home worlds blooming light years away. Marcus said, "The AI would never think to make Grace cry when the first alien flower bloomed," showing that scene. But that moment, that realization that she's creating something bigger than what people have done, that she's honoring other species by preserving their plant heritage, that's why people remember the story. In Grace's revision, she told a doubtful human administrator why she was wasting space on alien plants instead of crops. "We're not just building a colony. We're making a bridge. Every species that sees their flowers here will know that we cared about them, thought about them, and wanted to protect what they love. That is worth more than getting more wheat." The best moment for Marcus was when an alien dignitary came to visit years later and saw a part of the garden that was dedicated to plants that had gone extinct on destroyed worlds. These were species that only existed now because Grace had kept them alive. The alien knelt in the dirt and touched leaves from her home planet, which had been destroyed in a war. She cried for a home that no longer existed, except in this garden made by humans. Marcus said softly, "It took me 3 hours to write that scene. It took 3 hours to get the emotional beats right, to show Grace understanding what it means to be the keeper of beauty that is no longer there, and to show that people think in terms of preservation, honoring what's lost and making beauty to comfort others. The AI can't even begin to understand that kind of empathetic thinking." Another example was The Last Song, which was about a human musician playing at the state funeral of an alien empress. It was ceremonial, dignified, and diplomatic. Marcus changed it into a story about Martha Chin, An old violinist who saw the Empress's grandson crying in the corner while she was playing. He was only 6 years old by his species development, had just lost his parents and was trying to be brave. Martha stopped playing the formal piece that had been asked of her. Instead, she sang a lullaby that her grandmother had sung to her at her mother's funeral 70 years ago. Simple and gentle, made for a scared child who needed comfort more than ceremony. The alien court was shocked. She had broken the rules. But the child stopped crying, came closer, and finally fell asleep to the music. The Empress's family thanked Martha not for being a good diplomat, but for seeing their pain and responding with kindness instead of political correctness. AI thinks about finishing the tasks it has been given, Marcus said. The AI has Martha do the ceremonial music because that was her job. But I asked, what would a real person do in that situation? They would help a scared child no matter what the rules said. That's how we are as people. We put compassion above being right. There was no doubt about the metrics Marcus pulled up. Stories he changed to focus on kindness, mercy, compassion, and moral courage did 3 to 5 times better than stories that were just about action. People who watched them shared them more, commented more, and most importantly said they were more emotionally moved. This one is my favorite, Marcus said as he opened The Forgiveness Protocol. The AI had made up a typical revenge story about people hunting down war criminals who had done terrible things. The AI told people to catch them and bring them to justice. A clean moral win. It was completely different because of Marcus. Daniel Matthews, the human tracker, spent years looking for a specific war criminal who was responsible for a massacre that killed Daniel's whole family. The AI's version ended with the person being caught and put on trial. Marcus's version ended with Daniel standing in front of the criminal and choosing not to kill him, even though he had the perfect chance. Daniel said in Marcus's version, "You killed everyone I loved," pointing his gun at the scared criminal. "My wife. My kids. My parents who were there that day. I've been thinking about this moment for 8 years. 8 years of planning exactly what I would do to you." The criminal was ready to die. "But my daughter," Daniel said, his voice breaking, "my 7-year-old daughter, her last words to me were, 'Don't be angry, Daddy.' She said that every night when I put her to bed she was trying to help me be better because I had a temper." Daniel put down his gun. "I could kill you. God knows you deserve it. But then I'd be the kind of person my daughter was scared I'd turn into. I'd be angry forever and she was right to be worried. So instead I'm going to be the dad she thought I could be. I'm going to let you live, go to court and deal with what you've done. And I'm going to try to forgive you, even though it's going to be very hard for me." Daniel walked away at the end of the scene. The criminal was in custody but alive. Daniel was also alive in a deeper way, choosing to honor his daughter's memory by showing mercy instead of revenge. The comments on that story were amazing. "I lost my brother to violence. This story made me realize that revenge wouldn't bring him back. I'll be the father she thought I could be. I had to stop the video because I was crying so hard. This is what makes us different from animals. We have the power to break the cycle." I've talked about this story with my therapist 3 times now. It helps me deal with my own anger. AI would end with revenge because it doesn't get that being the person your loved ones thought you could be is harder and braver than any violence. Marcus showed 15 more examples, all of which showed the same idea. People choosing the harder right over the easier wrong. People showing kindness to people who didn't deserve it. People building bridges instead of walls, even though walls would be easier. People don't just want to see people win, Marcus said, resting his hand on a printed copy of The Forgiveness Protocol that was full of notes. They want to see us win while still being human, kind, hopeful, and compassionate even when it's hard. They want to think that you don't have to be cruel to be smart or powerful. They want to see themselves at their best, or at least what best could look like. He pulled up viewer testimonials that the marketing team had collected. "I watch Galactic Prime when I'm losing faith in humanity. These stories make me think about what we can be. My son wanted to know why the person didn't kill the bad guy. We talked for 2 hours about revenge and justice. Thanks for that. From an alien's point of view, these stories make me wish my species thought like yours. These stories are bright in a world full of bad news. They give me hope. They're what I want." Marcus read these out loud and his voice showed real emotion. "This is why I stress being nice," he said. "Not because it's naive or sentimental, but because people really need it. They want to think that being kind isn't a sign of weakness. They want to think of mercy as a sign of strength. They want to picture a future where people go to space and bring their best traits with them, not just their weapons." He showed the AI's outputs versus his revisions side by side, 15 stories, 30 versions. It was clear what the pattern was. AI wrote that people are better than machines. Marcus wrote that people are good. Marcus pointed to that story and said, the AI would never randomly make Daniel choose forgiveness. It would figure that revenge is the logical end to a revenge plot. But I know something the AI doesn't. Real human strength often looks weak from the outside. Sometimes real courage looks like giving up. Letting your enemy live is often the best way to win. He stopped for a moment to think about what he was going to say next. I add kindness because people need it. The people in the stories and the people who are watching them. These stories are a counterargument to a world that often rewards cruelty, values strength over compassion, and mistakes kindness for weakness. They say, no, the best thing we can do is care. Mercy is the most courageous thing we can do. Choosing love over hate is the most advanced thing we can do. The screen showed Grace crying over alien flowers, Martha playing for a scared child, Daniel putting down his weapon, and Jennifer giving water to her enemy. These were all moments that the AI would never have come up with on its own because they required knowing why people value kindness more than winning. Marcus said softly, that's not algorithms. That's what people have learned from their own history. It's knowing that our best qualities aren't our weapons or our brains, but how well we can stay calm under pressure. For choosing to be kind even when we're scared, angry, or hurt. Because we think being better is important, we try to be better than we have to be. The numbers were right. Stories that focused on human kindness did better than all the others. People shared them, talked about them, used them to teach their kids, and quoted them when things got tough. Marcus said, this is the secret ingredient, putting his hand on his heart. Not just adding emotion, but adding emotion that is specific to humans. Oh, kindness. The stubbornness of wanting to be good even when it's not. Even when it's tough. Even when no one is watching and we could get away with being mean. He looked at the camera one last time. The AI tells me stories about people. I turn them into stories about people, the best things about us and what we could be. That's what makes them different. That's all there is. People think editing is just fixing grammar and catching typos, Marcus said as he pulled up a complicated timeline visualization that took up both screens. Let me show you what the process really looks like. This is how one story changed over the course of 6 weeks. Every major change, every feedback loop, and every iteration that turned raw AI output into something that really works. The screen showed a branching tree structure for a story called The Bridge Between Stars. It was about a human translator helping two alien species talk to each other after they had been at war for generations because of misunderstandings about language. The first version, called AI Generation at the base of the tree, was made 6 weeks ago. From there, branches split into 12 different versions. Some ran parallel with different approaches being tested at the same time, while others built on each other as Marcus honed his direction. Every story goes through this, Marcus said, pointing to certain branches. The AI makes the first draft in about 15 minutes. It has 10,000 words, a full plot, dialogue, and structure. Then I work on making it human for days or even weeks. This isn't just one round of editing. There are several full revisions, each one focusing on a different part of the story. He clicked on version 1, which was the AI's first draft. The story was okay. Michael Torres, a translator, goes to peace talks, uses his skills to figure out the language roots of the conflict, helps people understand, and peace is reached. The story made sense. The structure was solid. There were characters and they did their jobs. Marcus said, now watch how it changes, and then he moved to version 2, which was 2 days later. This version had his first big structural change, which was color-coded to show how much had changed. Red highlighting showed that the text had been completely rewritten, which was about 40% of it. Another 30% of the content changed a lot, as shown by the yellow. Only 30% of the original AI text was still somewhat intact. He made a lot of changes to this version. Michael can't just be a skilled translator. What does he care about this fight? A personal connection is needed. Mother was Zentari, one of the warring species, and father was human. He's the bridge between species, but let's make that a metaphor for biological reality. The language misunderstanding is too easy. AI made it one word that was wrong. Real linguistic drift is harder to understand. Adding cultural context and idioms that have changed meaning over the years, both species think the other is being rude when really they are just speaking past each other. Peace comes too easily. AI can fix everything with just one conversation. It takes more than just a few years of war to really make peace. Setbacks, failures, and times when it seems impossible are all part of the process. The journey has to be hard, otherwise the destination doesn't matter. 4 days after version 2, Marcus clicked through to version 3. He said, This is where I started to work on Michael's internal voice. The AI made him look like a skilled worker. I needed him to be a real person, someone who was having trouble with his identity as a mixed-species person who never really felt like he belonged to either culture and used translation to fill the gap he felt in himself. The changes in this version were less obvious but still made a big difference. Michael's dialogue became more hesitant, unsure of himself and personal. When an alien delegate asked him if he was fair, version 2 had Michael give professional assurances. He said, "You're right to question me," in version 3. "I am half Centauri. I care about this peace, which means I might be the worst person to help it happen or the only one who cares enough to make it happen. I really don't know which one." Marcus said, AI would never create that kind of vulnerability or honesty about bias. AI thinks about how good protagonists can solve problems. I added the fact that people trying to solve big problems often don't know if they're doing the right thing. Versions 4 through 7 ran at the same time. Marcus had come up with 3 different ways to show a key scene where talks fell apart. He said, "I didn't know which way would be best. I wrote it in 3 different ways. One was about how Michael's emotions were falling apart. One was about the historical trauma that has happened between species. One was about a junior diplomat from each side who became friends in an unexpected way. I tried all 3 with small groups of people." He showed the data from the feedback. Version 5, which had the junior diplomat's friendship, had the most emotional engagement. So I deleted the other branches and kept this one. This is iterative creative work. Trying out different ideas, seeing what works and getting rid of the ones that don't help the story. Version 8 included the chosen direction and showed Marcus adding a whole new character, a young Keltran diplomat named Shara who reminded Michael of his mother. The AI had given all the characters needed for the plot, Marcus said. But the story needed an emotional anchor, someone Michael could see his mother in, someone who made the abstract conflict personal. In version 1 Shara didn't exist. I made her in version 8, and then I had to change all the scenes that came before her to include her. The timestamps say that it took 3 days of work to make that change. Every scene had to be changed to fit Shara's point of view, her growing friendship with Michael, and the way her view of the world challenged his. "Now it gets really interesting," Marcus said as he pulled up version 9. "I sent this back to the AI with very clear directions. I had added all of this emotional depth and personal connection, but now the technical parts of the linguistic solution seemed weak in comparison. I needed the actual translation work to be as interesting as the drama between people." He gave the AI this prompt. Add more examples of how words have changed meaning over the years to the linguistics section. Make it technical enough to seem real but not too technical for most people. Show 3 specific mistranslations that caused problems, and have Michael work through each one step by step. Keep the emotional weight that's already there, but add the satisfaction of solving problems. Based on his instructions, the AI made new content. "This is the teamwork," Marcus said. "I'm not just changing what the AI gives me. I'm in charge of it, telling it what I need and then changing what it makes based on that. It's an iterative process. I tell AI what I need and it gives me volume and detail. Then I fine-tune that detail to make it more resonant." Version 10 combined the AI's expanded linguistics content with Marcus's changes to make it fit with the emotional story. The timestamps showed that he had been working on this version for 12 hours straight. He said, "Sometimes I get into a flow state, where I'm moving between AI-generated content and my own additions so smoothly that the seams disappear. That's when the magic happens. You can't tell where I stopped and the AI started." Audio recording notes was written on version 11. Marcus had read the whole story and thought about how it would sound when read aloud, changing the rhythm and speed for spoken word instead of written text. He said, "Reading aloud changes everything. Sentences that look good on paper can sound clunky or weird. When you speak, dialogue that sounds good on paper can sound strange. This pass is all about sound issues." His notes had timing markers. "Stop here and let the weight of this news sink in. Speed up through this part to build up to the climax. Slow delivery, grief needs time." AI didn't put these in the original text because it doesn't understand performance and doesn't know how timing and silence can make human voices sound emotional. The last version that was published, version 12, had changes made after test audiences saw it. Marcus had played the audio for a small group of regular viewers and used their comments to make changes. "They caught things I missed," he said, pointing out specific comments. One viewer said that Michael's mother was mentioned in Chapter 2 but her death wasn't made clear until Chapter 5, which caused some confusion. To fix that, I moved one paragraph. Someone else thought the ending was too sudden, so I added 2 more paragraphs to the end. Small changes based on new people seeing the story for the first time. Marcus looked at the timeline and said, "This whole process from AI generation to published final version took 6 weeks of work. The AI's part was 15 minutes. In those 6 weeks I put in about 80 hours of work. That's what it's like to make good content, even with help from AI." He pulled up the timeline for another story, which was even more complicated because it had 14 versions over the course of 7 weeks. The Bridge Between Stars was not that hard to understand. This one, The Silence Between Worlds, is about a human making first contact with a species that talks through smell instead of sound. It took even more work because I had to figure out how to make smell-based communication work in an audio format. The branching structure showed that Marcus had tried 5 completely different ways to solve the problem before finding one that worked. Each branch represented days of work that were eventually deleted. "This is what people don't see," he said, pointing to the branches that were no longer there. "All the work that doesn't make it into the end product. All the times things didn't work out and went nowhere. The AI makes content without any trouble. I make sense of things by trying again and again even when I fail." He showed statistics for all the stories he had worked on. The average number of versions was 9, the average time from the first AI draft to the final published version was 4 weeks, and the average percentage of original AI text that stayed in the final version was less than 20%. 20%? Marcus said again. "Even though we call this AI-assisted content, 80% of the final story is my work. The AI gives the structure. I give you the muscles, organs, skin, circulatory system, nervous system, and soul. The AI gives me something to do. I make it something worth doing." He brought up a certain scene to show how things have changed. The AI's version 1 description of Michael having a breakthrough about the language barrier says, "Michael suddenly realized that the key word had changed meaning." He told both groups about this. They understood and agreed to think about their positions again. Version 12, after 6 weeks of changes, Michael stopped in the middle of a sentence, and his eyes widened as the pieces fell into place. The word they had been arguing about for 3 hours, Kashira, in ancient Zentari, meant protective strength, when the treaty was written 1,000 years ago. But in modern Zentari, it meant controlling dominance. The Keltrans had been using the old meaning. The Zentari had heard the new one. It's no surprise they were so mad. The Keltrans thought they were offering a partnership that would keep them safe. The Zentari heard a call for submission. "Oh gods," Michael whispered, half Zentari blood recognizing what his mother's people had been hearing for generations. "You never threatened each other. You were using the same words but speaking different languages." Marcus said, "That's what 6 weeks of iteration does. From a flat explanation to a deep understanding. From facts to feelings. From AI to human creation." He showed one last timeline, this one for their most popular story ever, The Compassion Frequency, which got 8 million views and thousands of emotional comments. Over 9 weeks of work, there were 22 versions. "Our most complicated process led to our biggest success," Marcus said. "Quality takes time. You need to be patient when you iterate. The AI wants to be done in a few minutes. I'll spend months getting it right." The last screen showed all of GalacticPrime's stories as timelines that were connected to each other. There were dozens of branches, each representing hundreds of hours of work. Marcus said quietly, "This is what people don't see when they think it's all automated. They look at the finished product and think, AI did that. They don't see the skilled worker spending weeks turning raw materials into art." He looked at the camera with a face that showed he was both tired and happy. "The AI makes. I go over things again. The AI makes. I am perfect. The AI opens up new options. I decide which options are important and why. That's how to dance. That's the work together. That's how a Galactic Prime story really starts." Marcus leaned forward in his chair, and his face became more serious and focused. This was clearly the main point he wanted to make. "Let me be very clear about one thing. I think this is the most important thing I can say about AI and creativity and what we're doing here at Galactic Prime. AI is amazing. Truly amazing. It's a game-changing tool that has changed the way we make content, and I don't want anyone to leave here thinking I'm against AI or that I'm downplaying its importance." He pointed to his left monitor where AI-generated text was still there. "We couldn't make a fraction of our content without this technology. The AI gives us the framework, the structure, and the initial creative spark that would take a human writer days or weeks to come up with from scratch. It never gets tired, never experiences writer's block, and never stares at a blank page at 3 in the morning wondering if anything they write will ever matter. It just generates. And that's valuable. That's powerful. That's the future of content creation." He stopped for a moment and put his hand on his chest. But the word hung in the air, heavy with meaning. AI doesn't cry at movies. It doesn't lie awake at night wondering if it said the right thing to a friend. It doesn't know what it feels like to lose someone you love so much that their absence becomes a physical ache you carry forever. It doesn't understand the sensation of being terrified and brave at the same time, your hands shaking but your feet moving forward anyway. It doesn't know what it means to choose kindness when cruelty would be so much easier. And our stories? They're about all of that. They're about the messy, complicated, beautiful, painful experience of being human. He opened the last draft of The Last Mediator, the story about James Rodriguez standing up to Warlord Kresh that he had shown him before. The screen froze on the moment of the hug, when the human hugged the crystal alien who could have killed him, choosing to show compassion instead of keeping his distance. Everyone who heard James Rodriguez stand up to that warlord felt something, Marcus said, his voice heavy with the weight of thousands of viewer comments. They felt his fear. They felt his bravery. They felt the moment he chose friendship over safety and chose to save Kresh's soul even though it put his own life in danger. And people cried. They really cried. Because they saw the truth in that moment, that real courage often looks like weakness and that real strength is being vulnerable anyway. He clicked on the comment section and read some of the answers. I cried when he hugged me. My father taught me that real men protect others even from themselves. James is that. I'm a veteran of war. This scene showed something about bravery that most war stories don't. It's not about not being afraid, it's about being scared and doing it anyway. I showed this to my daughter who is being bullied. We talked about how being brave and standing up for others is what makes us human. Marcus gently touched the screen and said, "That's not AI. That's human experience, emotion, and understanding turned into a story about aliens and spaceships." The AI gave me the stage, the setting, the basic conflict, and the character names. I gave it the heart. I gave it the moment when James's voice breaks and he steadies it. I gave it the choice to hug someone made of knives because that's what friends do. I gave it the truth that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is show someone you care even when they're at their most dangerous. He opened another file, this one with a lot of messages from viewers that had been sent straight to Galactic Prime. Not just comments but also longer emails and letters about how the stories changed their lives. A teacher sent this message: I've been using your stories in my ethics class to talk about moral courage. Last week we looked at the forgiveness protocol, and I had 17-year-olds having deep conversations about justice versus revenge, about who we become through our choices, and about what it means to honor the people we've lost. Thank you for making content that treats young people as capable of deep emotional and philosophical thinking. A message from a military veteran: I struggle with PTSD. Your story, The Mercy Doctrine, where Commander Walsh helps the enemy who killed her people, really hit me hard. I've been angry at people who hurt me for years. Seeing a character choose mercy while still acknowledging her pain and rage, and seeing that mercy didn't mean forgetting or excusing what happened, just choosing not to become a monster herself, that's helping me process things my therapist and I have been working on for years. A teenager wrote, I'm 15 and I was starting to think that people are basically trash. The news is always bad, people are always mean to each other, and I was losing hope that we're worth saving. Your stories remind me that we can be good. That caring about others even when it's hard or dumb or dangerous, that's what makes us human. That's what makes us worth saving. Thank you. Marcus read these out loud and his voice was full of feeling. These messages? That's why I do this work. That's why I spend 80 hours over 6 weeks polishing a single story. Every hour I spend making a scene more emotionally resonant. Every time I rewrite dialogue until it sounds like how real people talk when they're scared, hopeful, or heartbroken, every emotional beat I strengthen, it matters because it reaches someone. It makes them feel something. It changes how they see themselves and humanity and what we're capable of becoming. He stared straight at the camera with intense eyes. The AI can't write these messages because it doesn't know what it means to help a veteran deal with trauma through a story about made-up aliens, give a teenager hope about what people can do, or give a teacher material that makes students think deeply about ethics and choice. Marcus put up a side-by-side comparison of an AI-generated story about human achievement and his own revision that focused on human compassion. The AI's version would get views. It's competent. But my version gets messages like these. It gets people writing to say we changed their perspective, helped them through difficulty, gave them hope. That's not because I'm a better writer than the AI in a technical sense. The AI's grammar is flawless, its structure sound. It's because I bring something the AI can't: lived human experience and the ability to recognize and amplify emotional truth. He opened his notebook again and showed a page where he had written down the main questions he asked himself during each revision. Would I cry if I read about this moment in a story? Does this character's choice seem like something that real people would do when they're under stress? Am I using emotion to get what I want, or am I earning it through honest setup? Does this scene show that I respect the intelligence and emotional depth of my audience? What truth about people am I trying to share here? Marcus said, these aren't technical questions. These are questions about people. I have to check my own feelings, think about my own experiences of fear, love, loss, and hope, and remember what it was like to be moved by a story and figure out how to make that happen for others. He talked about a story he had just finished called The Memory Keeper, which was about a human archivist who keeps the histories of alien civilizations that are no longer around. The AI had made a simple archival story. Records were kept, knowledge was saved, and important work was recognized. Marcus changed it by adding that the archivist, an older woman named Ruth Chin, had lost her family's historical records in a fire when she was a child. She lost her grandmother's journals, her great-grandfather's letters from the war, and her mother's art. Ruth spent her whole life making sure that no other culture, whether human or alien, had to deal with that permanent loss of connection to their past. When Ruth holds an alien artifact, a child's toy from a species that went extinct 300 years ago, and cries because she knows some parent cherished this toy, played with their child with it, never imagining their entire civilization would vanish. That's human empathy, Marcus said. That's realizing that love and loss are universal, even between species and over time. The AI can't write that scene because it doesn't know what it's like to lose memories that can't be replaced or to wish you could get back something valuable that is gone forever. In Marcus's version, Ruth talks to the alien artifacts as she catalogs them, treating them like people. You're a musical instrument, aren't you? Someone learned to play you. Someone got better over years of practice. Someone performed at celebrations. I'm so sorry they're gone. I'm so sorry I can't hear the music you made. But I'll keep you safe. I'll make sure future generations know that your civilization valued music, beauty, and art. That matters. You matter. Marcus said, that's love, grief, and determination all mixed together. That's the complexity of being human that makes readers think about their own connections to the past, their own fears of being forgotten, and their own desire to keep what matters. AI makes words, but I make meaning that connects with human experience. Even though The Memory Keeper was quieter and had less action than most of their other content, the analytics showed that it was one of their best performing stories. The comments showed why. I called my grandma after watching this. We talked for 2 hours about family history that I had never thought to ask about. Thank you. I work in a museum. Ruth is every curator who's ever lived. We do this work because we believe the past matters, even when no one is left to remember it. My culture is in danger because there are only a few thousand speakers of our language left. This story made me cry and made me want to record the stories of my elders before it's too late. I study AI and I have to say that AI would never write this. It took understanding grief, legacy, and the need for people to matter beyond their own lives. That last comment made Marcus smile. Even AI researchers know that there are limits. Yes, the technology is moving quickly. It's getting better at imitating human emotion and making content that looks like deep human storytelling. But imitation isn't understanding and pattern recognition isn't wisdom. Processing training data isn't the same as having lived through experiences that teach you what matters and why. He brought up one last comparison. A story that had just been published and gone through his full revision process versus an experimental control where they had published AI content with very little editing. Same basic story, same characters, and same basic structure. The AI version with only a few changes did pretty well. 5 times as many people interacted with Marcus's fully revised version. The difference isn't just quality in a general way, Marcus said as he showed the comparative analytics. The way people react is different. The AI version got comments like, cool story, and nice. These are generic, forgettable responses. My version got long paragraphs about how the story changed people's minds about courage, kindness, and what it means to be human. It got messages from parents who read it with their kids and had deep conversations afterward. It got teachers asking to use it in class. It got people saying it helped them through tough times. He pointed to all the screens around him, the AI interfaces, his revision documents, the messages from viewers, and the analytics that showed how important human touch was. We're not just making content, Marcus said with quiet intensity. We're making connections. We're giving people stories that matter to them, that stick with them, and that change how they see themselves in the world. The AI can't do that by itself because making connections requires understanding the human experience at a level that goes beyond data analysis and pattern recognition. It requires having a soul and recognizing soul in others. Again he put his hand over his heart. I cry at sad movies. I remember my first heartbreak and how it felt like the world was ending. I know what it's like to be brave when you're scared, to choose kindness when you're mad, and to find hope when everything seems dark. I bring those experiences to every story I touch. I bring human wisdom earned through living. And that indescribable quality of having been human, having felt human emotions, and having made human choices, that's what turns AI-generated content into art that really matters. Marcus saw the picture of his daughter reading his story on his desk. He said softly, "When I edit, I think about her. I think about the person she's becoming, the world she'll inherit, and the stories that will shape how she sees humanity and our potential. I want to give her, and everyone watching, stories that make them proud to be human. Stories that show we can be brave, kind, and compassionate even when it's hard. Stories that show our emotions are not weaknesses but our greatest strengths." He looked back at the camera with an expression of complete certainty. "That's not in the AI's training data, it's in my heart. That's why it matters. That's why human creators will always be important, no matter how advanced the technology gets. Stories aren't just facts to be shared, they're experiences that need to be shared between human hearts. And you need a human heart to make them." There were dozens of stories on the screen behind him. Each one had been turned into meaningful art through hundreds of hours of hard work by people. "This is what I bring," Marcus said plainly. "Not just editing skills, not just technical competence, but also understanding people. The ability to look at a story and ask, what would make this matter? What truth about being human can I communicate here? What would move me if I encountered this, and how can I create that experience for others? What do people need to feel right now? Hope, catharsis, recognition, comfort? And how can I give them that through this narrative?" He smiled, and it was a real smile that showed how much he loved his job. "The AI is my partner in this process. It's a brilliant, tireless partner that does the heavy lifting of generation. But I'm the soul of Galactic Prime. I'm the beating heart that makes these stories live and breathe and matter. I'm the human touch that changes silicon into soul. And that will never be automated, no matter how advanced the technology becomes." "Let me show you something that should help you understand all of this," Marcus said, and his tone changed from philosophical to analytical. "I could talk all day about how important the human touch and emotional resonance are in stories and how important the soul is in storytelling. But we are also a business, and businesses need data to work. So, let's see what the numbers really say about how valuable human editing is in a content operation that uses AI." He opened GalacticPrime's full analytics dashboard, which is a complicated interface that shows metrics for every piece of content they had published in the last 18 months. Marcus said, "About 6 months into our operation, we did a very planned experiment. The marketing team wanted to know if all this editing by people was really necessary, or if we could just publish stories made by AI with little editing and get the same results. So we tried it out. There were 2 parallel content tracks on the screen. Track A, AI-generated stories with very little editing. Just basic proofreading for grammar and factual consistency, which might take about 30 minutes of human time for each story. Track B, AI-written stories that go through Marcus's full revision process, which usually takes him 40 to 80 hours of iterative development, emotional refinement, and careful crafting. Same AI system making the first drafts, Marcus said. The quality of the voice narration is the same. Same level of quality in production. We pushed both tracks equally through our social media and partner channels, so the marketing was the same. The only thing that changed was how much human editing was done. We couldn't make it a real-world controlled experiment, but this was as close as we could get." He brought up the comparative data, and the results were very clear. Track A, with very little editing, got an average of 150,000 views per story, but only 62% of people who started watching actually finished the story. There were about 40 comments on each video, and most of them were the same: "Nice story, thanks for posting," and "Cool story." Track B, Marcus's full editing, got an average of 385,000 views per story and a completion rate of 91%. There were more than 300 comments on each video, and the responses were much longer and more detailed. "Views more than doubled," Marcus said, pointing out the difference. But that's not even the most important number. Look at the completion rate, which is the percentage of viewers who watched the whole story from start to finish. That went up from 62% to 91%. That's a lot. That means people weren't just clicking on it because the thumbnail or title looked cool. They stayed because the story itself made them want to keep listening. He looked more closely at the engagement metrics, which showed even bigger differences. The average time people spent watching Track A stories was 8.3 minutes out of a total of 15 minutes. Viewers watched almost the whole story on Track B, which lasted 13.7 minutes. But the real difference is here, Marcus said, switching to a different dashboard that showed what the team called emotional engagement indicators. These comments showed real emotional responses, not just general agreement. They talked about crying, getting chills, being deeply moved, having their thoughts provoked, and feeling changed by the story. Track A, 14% of the comments showed that people were emotionally involved. Track B, 68% of the comments showed that people were emotionally involved. Almost 5 times more likely to get a real emotional response, Marcus said. That's the difference between stories that people passively read and stories that actually affect them. That's what makes art different from entertainment. He showed how different comments were on similar stories, one from each track with plots that were almost the same about people helping aliens. Track A says, "Cool story about helping aliens. Nice that people are brothers. Good episode. Thumbs up. I'm crying at my desk," said Track B. "That scene where she realizes that saving them means facing her own trauma broke my heart. This is why I like this channel. You don't just tell stories, you make us feel what it means to be human. I just called my therapist to talk about this show. It made me think about a lot of things I've been putting off about my past. I teach ethics to high school students and I'm going to use this in class tomorrow. This is the kind of complicated moral reasoning I want my students to think about. Do you see the difference?" Marcus wanted to know. Not just, "I like this," but "this changed me." Not just passively taking in themes, characters, and ideas, but actively engaging with them. That's what the human touch adds. Stories that don't just make you laugh but also make you think. The financial numbers were just as interesting. The percentage of subscribers who stayed subscribed from month to month was 43% higher for viewers who mostly watched Track B content than for those who mostly watched Track A content. Marcus said, people who read the fully edited stories were much more likely to stay subscribed. They didn't just watch one video and leave, they came back. They joined our community. They put money into Galactic Prime as a channel because they trusted that we would always give them stories that were important to them. There was an even bigger difference in Patreon support. During the experiment, Galactic Prime started a Patreon that gave people early access to stories and behind-the-scenes content. Marcus said, "We promoted it equally on both tracks. But check out the rates of conversion. 0.3% of people who watched Track A content became Patreon supporters. 2.7% of people who watched Track B content became Patreon supporters." Marcus said, 9 times more likely to give us money. Because they didn't just like the content, they thought it was worth paying for more of it. That's what makes content and connection different. People pay to connect. Next, he showed sales of merchandise. Galactic Prime had begun selling t-shirts and posters with quotes from well-known stories on them. Marcus said, "We only sold things from Track B stories. Track A didn't make quotes that people wanted to wear or show off. Nobody wanted a shirt that said, 'Humans solved the problem quickly.' But they did want shirts that said things like, 'Be afraid of our compassion,' 'Friends don't let friends commit genocide,' or 'Your species is crazy, said with love.'" The chart of sales for the product showed steady growth, with some quotes doing much better than others. Marcus heavily edited all of the top-selling stories to focus on emotional truth and human values. This quote from The Last Mediator says, "I'm watching you turn into a monster because you're in pain. I won't let you do that," has sold more than 1,500 shirts, Marcus said. Because it's not just a cool line from a book. It's a truth about friendship, helping people, and caring for them even when they're at their worst. People want to keep that in mind. Next, he looked at social media metrics. Track B stories got 5 times as many shares on social media as Track A's. But more importantly, the way people shared was different. Track A shares were mostly just, "Check this out," Marcus said, showing examples. General suggestions. But Track B shares were personal stories. People talking about why the story was important to them, what it made them think about, and how it changed the way they saw things. He showed a Twitter thread where someone had shared the forgiveness protocol, and talked about how they had trouble forgiving someone who had hurt them. The story helped them realize that forgiveness isn't about letting that harm define them, but about not letting it define them. The thread had been retweeted thousands of times and sparked a long discussion about justice, revenge, and healing. Marcus said, "That's not just marketing. That's what impact means. That is a story that is becoming part of someone's emotional and philosophical journey. AI can't make that on its own because it doesn't get that people need stories to help them deal with their own experiences. He showed the metrics for classroom adoption, which were the number of teachers who had asked to use GalacticPrime's stories as teaching tools. More than 200 teachers had used Track B stories in classes like creative writing, ethics, and communication studies. There was no educational use of Track A. Teachers trust Track B content because it handles difficult topics in a smart way, Marcus said. These stories can start important conversations about moral reasoning, character development, understanding other cultures, and what it means to be human. You can't do that with AI content that is shallow and doesn't have any emotional or philosophical depth. Marcus said that the most important measure was what they called conversation generation. This was the extent to which stories led to long discussions in comments, forums, and social media that went beyond simple reactions. Track A, an average of 3.2 follow-up conversations per story, which are defined as comment threads with more than 5 exchanges. Track B, an average of 47.8 follow-up conversations for each story. 15 times more likely to start a real conversation, Marcus said. People can talk about these stories because they are interesting. They make you think, what would you have done? Is it ever right to get back at someone? How do we find a balance between justice and mercy? What does it mean to be brave? It's worth talking about these questions because there isn't an easy answer to any of them. He showed a few comment threads from Track B stories. These were long, thoughtful conversations between viewers about character motivations, philosophical implications, personal experiences related to themes, and building a community around their shared interest in the stories. This is what we're really building, Marcus said, pointing to the lively conversations. Not just a place to get content, but a group of people who care about these stories and the ideas they stand for. That doesn't happen with AI content that is too general. That means stories need to be deep and real enough to get people really involved. Marcus brought up one last comparison. The lifetime value of a viewer, which is how much money a viewer makes for the channel over the course of their relationship with it through ads, subscriptions, merchandise, and so on. The lifetime value of a Track A viewer is $2.37. The lifetime value of a Track B viewer is $18.92. 8 times higher lifetime value, Marcus said, letting that number sink in. People who watch Track B don't just watch and leave. They stay, subscribe, support on Patreon, buy merchandise, and share content that brings in new viewers. They care about Galactic Prime's success because they care about what we're making. He leaned back and looked at all the information that was on his screens. Galactic Prime could exist with only a little bit of edited AI content, Marcus said after thinking about it. Many channels do just that. They pump out AI-generated stories with little human input, focus on quantity over quality, and see it as a content arbitrage play. And they get decent numbers. They earn some money. They are real. He looked at Galactic Prime's overall growth path, which showed big increases in subscribers, views, revenue, and community involvement. But we wouldn't be this, he said next. We wouldn't have this community, this effect, or this legacy. We wouldn't have teachers using our stories in class, therapists talking about them with patients, or parents reading them with their kids. People wouldn't write to us to say that we helped them deal with grief, understand forgiveness, or believe in the good in people. We wouldn't have a lot of fans who come to every new story because they believe we'll give them something important. He showed the mission statement that he had helped write, which was front and center on their website, to honor the potential of people through stories that remind us why being human is important. Marcus said, every change I make serves that purpose. The AI helps us grow. But the human touch, my work, my hours, and my heart, are what give it meaning. And the numbers show it. The human editorial process creates a lot more value than AI generation alone, and this is clear, measurable, and undeniable. He pulled up one last screen that showed a cost-benefit analysis. The company had done the math on Marcus's salary and time compared to the difference in revenue between Track A and Track B content. Marcus said, my work costs the company about 40 hours of labor per story. If you only looked at my direct costs, they would be big. But the money made from minimally edited content is much more than the money made from fully edited content. Every story I work on makes enough extra money from views, subscriptions, and merchandise to make my time worth it 15 times over. The spreadsheet made it very clear. Marcus's editing work costs an average of $3,200 per story. Compared to a baseline of minimal editing, each story brings in an average of $51,000 more in revenue. Marcus said, 15-to-1 return on investment. Creatively, the human touch is the right thing to do, and financially, it's the smart thing to do. Companies that think they can save money by getting rid of human editors are not only hurting quality. They're giving up money, community, and long-term viability. He pointed to everything around him, the workspace, the tools, and the stories that were being worked on. This is why Galactic Prime pays for human editorial work, even though we could technically publish AI content faster and cheaper, Marcus said. Because we know what the data clearly shows, humans create value that AI alone can't. We make connections, give things meaning, and have an effect that builds not only views but also loyalty. Not just content but a community as well. Not just stories but legacies. The screens showed that Galactic Prime's numbers were still going up. More subscribers, more engagement, and more impact. Marcus said simply, the numbers don't lie. Human creativity, empathy, and wisdom are not luxuries in an age of AI. They are important. They are what set apart art from content, entertainment from meaning, and consumption from connection. And these are what make Galactic Prime work. Marcus got up from his chair and walked to the big whiteboard on the wall of his office, marker in hand. The board was full of current projects, with character arcs in red, plot progressions in blue, and thematic connections in green. He looked at it like someone who saw more than just ink on a page. He saw opportunities waiting to be taken. He said, "People ask me all the time if I'm worried AI will take my job." He also added a new link between two story arcs with a careful green line. Journalists ask it. The marketing team has asked it. My daughter asked it when she learned what I do. And here's my answer, the same every time. He turned to face the camera directly, marker still in hand. His body was relaxed, but his eyes were focused. AI will change how we tell stories. It already has. It's changed how stories are made it possible to make content on a scale that would have been impossible 10 years ago, and opened up creative possibilities that didn't exist before. But it won't, and it can't, replace the need for human storytellers. And I know this for sure because I know what stories are and what they're for. Marcus moved closer to the camera, and you could tell how much he cared about this topic by the way he spoke. Stories aren't just words put together in a way that makes sense. They're not just plots with beginnings, middles, and ends that follow the three-act structure and hit the right emotional beats. Stories are how we make sense of our lives. They're how we deal with fear, hope, love, and loss. They're how we connect with each other across distance and difference, across time and circumstance. Stories are the oldest technology that humans have for sharing wisdom, building empathy, and making sense of chaos. A slow montage of moments of bravery, kindness, creativity, and hope from Galactic Prime's most popular stories started playing on the screen behind him. Each one had Marcus's invisible fingerprints on their pacing, emotional impact, and basic humanity. James giving Kresh a hug. Elena saving the reactor while dealing with her past. Grace is crying over flowers from space. Daniel chooses to forgive and lowers his weapon. Jennifer giving water to her enemy who lost. The AI gives me the clay, Marcus said, pointing to his left monitor where raw AI text was waiting. It makes the raw material, characters, plots, conflicts, and resolutions. It's great at that. It never gets tired, is quick, and is always the same. But I shape that clay into something that makes people feel, think, and remember why our species, with all its flaws, fears, and failures, can do amazing things. He went back to his desk and sat on the edge of it instead of in his chair, which made him look more like he was talking. I've been in the same place as every character who doubts themselves. I know what it's like to wonder if you're good enough, if you're making the right choice, or if anyone will care about what you're trying to make. I understand the choice of every hero who chooses mercy over vengeance because I've had to make smaller versions of it, deciding whether to be kind to someone who hurt me, whether to help someone even when they don't deserve it, or whether to forgive when holding a grudge would be easier. I felt that longing for understanding and that relief when someone truly sees you despite your differences. Marcus picked up the red pen that had been worn down from so many edits. The AI processes data, billions of words, millions of stories, patterns and structures and correlations extracted from humanity's written output. That's powerful. That's valuable. But I process life. I process 20 years of learning how to tell stories, 42 years of being human, decades of reading and watching and experiencing narratives that moved me. I process my daughter's questions about what makes someone brave, my own experiences with loss and love, conversations with friends about forgiveness and justice, moments of fear I pushed through and times I failed to be as good as I wanted to be. He put the pen down softly. That's the difference. The AI can figure out how people usually act by looking at text. I can figure out how people act by living it. The AI can figure out how characters usually develop. I can figure out why people change and what it costs them. The AI can write dialogue that sounds natural. I know how people really talk when they're scared, hopeful, or trying to be brave, the pauses, the false starts, and the times when words fail and we have to find new ones. Marcus pointed to the folders on his computer that held hundreds of stories that were at different stages of development. Yes, we use AI. We love it and are thankful for it. It lets us tell more stories, reach more people, and explore more ideas than we could with only traditional methods. But we never forget that the stories that touch millions of hearts aren't just made, they're crafted. They're polished. They're filled with the messy, beautiful, complicated experience of being human. He walked to the wall behind his desk, which was covered in framed fan art from viewers. Each piece was made by someone who was so moved by a story that they spent hours making a picture of a moment that spoke to them. Marcus said, "Every one of these started as AI-generated text that I spent days or sometimes weeks changing. The AI gave me the skeleton, the basic structure, the characters, the plot beats. I added the muscle, the organs, the circulatory system that pumped life through the narrative. I added the nervous system that made it responsive to emotional truth. I added the skin that made it real and tangible. And most importantly, I added the beating heart that makes these stories live and breathe and matter to people." He took down one painting in particular, a watercolor of Elena Martinez pressing her hands against the reactor controls, with a look of fear and determination on her face. The artist had captured the moment Marcus had worked on for hours, when Elena's past and present came together. "This artist saw something in Elena that made them want to paint her," Marcus said quietly as he looked at the picture. "They saw truth in her fear and her courage. They saw something real in a made-up character facing a made-up crisis on a made-up space station. That recognition, that connection between people through story, that's what I create. That's what AI can't do by itself." He put the painting back where it belonged and walked back to his desk, which was where the real change happened. Marcus continued, sitting in his chair and looking directly at the camera with complete sincerity. "In a world that is becoming more automated, the human touch doesn't become obsolete. It becomes precious. It becomes the difference between content and connection, between words and meaning, between a story you read for 15 minutes and forget, and a story that changes you, that stays with you, that makes you think differently about yourself and humanity and what we're capable of becoming." Marcus opened a document that wasn't a story but a collection of messages from viewers about how GalacticPrime's stories had changed their lives. He had been gathering these for months and sorting them by theme. Stories that helped people deal with grief, stories that changed their views on forgiveness, stories that gave them hope when they were losing faith in humanity, and stories that helped them learn more about themselves. He said, "This is what I'm really making," as he went through hundreds of messages. Not just entertainment, though the stories should be entertaining. Not just content to fill algorithmic feeds. I'm creating meaning. I'm creating moments where people recognize truth about human nature, both its darkness and its light. I'm creating bridges between people who will never meet but who share the experience of having been moved by the same story, having felt the same emotions, having thought about the same questions. He stopped on one message and read it out loud. "I'm a doctor working in a war zone. Every day I treat people who have been hurt by other people. It's hard not to lose faith in humanity when you see what we can do to each other. I listen to your stories on the way to work because they remind me why I do this work. They remind me that people can also be incredibly kind, choose kindness even when it's hard, and be good even when being cruel would be easier. Thank you for these reminders. They keep me going." Marcus's voice had gotten thick with feeling. He stopped for a moment to gather his thoughts before moving on. "That message is why I do this. It's why I spend 80 hours editing a single story, why I rewrite the same scene 7 times until it feels right, why I lose sleep worrying about whether a character's motivation is clear enough or if an emotional beat lands properly. Because somewhere, a doctor working in impossible conditions is using my stories to remember why humanity is worth saving. And that matters more than efficiency, more than algorithmic optimization, and more than any metric AI could be trained to maximize." He showed another message, this time from a teacher. "I teach refugee children, kids who've been through a lot, lost their homes and family members, and have every reason to be angry at the world. Your story, The Last Song, about the musician playing for the dying empress. I played it for my class and we talked about how sometimes the bravest thing we can do is offer comfort even when we're hurting ourselves. One of my students, a girl who hasn't spoken much since arriving, raised her hand and said, 'That's what my grandmother did. She sang to us even when she was sad.' It was the first time she'd shared anything personal. Your story helped her open up. Thank you." Marcus put down his phone and looked straight at the camera, his eyes shining. AI can't know that a story about a made-up musician and a made-up alien empress would help a child who has been through a lot feel safe enough to talk about her own grief. AI can't guess that a scene about forgiveness in a space opera would help someone deal with their anger and choose healing. AI can't guess all the ways that human stories connect with human lives when people need them and are going through changes. He pointed to his desk, which had monitors, notebooks, pictures, old paperbacks, and a whiteboard full of character arcs on it. This is what human storytellers bring. Not just the technical skill of putting words together, though that is important. We bring our own lived experiences. We bring emotional wisdom that we've gained through our own struggles and successes. We bring the ability to see universal truths in specific stories because we've lived those truths ourselves, even in different forms. We bring heart. Marcus got up and walked to the window to see the skyline of Portland in the distance. Stories have been with us since we sat around fires in caves, trying to figure out the world and our place in it. We told stories about hunts and heroes, gods and monsters, love and loss, and the never-ending fight to be good in a world that doesn't always reward goodness. We've told stories through oral tradition, written texts, plays, movies, and now AI-assisted digital content. The medium changes and the technology gets better, but the main purpose stays the same. He looked back at the camera. We tell stories to understand ourselves, connect with others, pass on wisdom, make sense of things, and remember who we are and who we can be. That basic human need can't be automated because it's what makes us human. The montage of GalacticPrime's best moments kept playing behind him. It showed people at their best, facing impossible problems with bravery, kindness, and hope. Every moment shows what happens when AI and human creativity work together in a real way. This is Galactic Prime, Marcus said, his voice full of pride and humility. Where AI meets art. Where technology helps tell stories instead of taking them away. Where a human hand shapes every story of human greatness, a human heart refines it, and a human mind understands it. The camera slowly pulled back to show Marcus in his office, surrounded by both old and new tools of his trade. A human editor in an age of AI is irreplaceable because he is a person. In the future, AI will get better. A lot better. It will learn to mimic human emotion more convincingly, to make more complex stories, and to get closer to human creativity. And I welcome that. Better tools make better work possible. But no matter how advanced the AI becomes, it will still need human wisdom to guide it, human empathy to shape it, and human values to direct it toward making stories that don't just entertain but also teach. That don't just get views but also give meaning. Marcus smiled and went back to his desk, where another AI draft was waiting for him. It was ready to be turned from silicon into soul. This is what I bring to every story, the understanding that we're not just making content, we're creating connections. We're not just filling time, we're fulfilling the ancient human need for narratives that help us understand ourselves and each other. We're not just generating text, we're generating hope. Hope that humanity, for all its flaws, is capable of extraordinary kindness, remarkable courage, and profound compassion. He picked up his red pen and looked over the AI-generated draft in front of him. His mind was already working on how to make the story more interesting and add a human touch that would make it matter. Powered by AI. Marcus said quietly as he read the tagline that he had insisted on putting on every Galactic Prime video. Made for you and perfected by people. The screen faded to show the Galactic Prime logo, but the words below it stayed. These words summed up the whole philosophy behind their success. AI powers it. Made perfect by people. Made just for you. Because that was the truth that mattered in the end. Not algorithms, efficiency, or technological wonders, though those helped. The truth was something much older, more basic, and longer lasting. The truth was that people told stories about people, for people, with all the love, care, and understanding that only a human heart could give. Tales of courage in the face of fear. About being nice even when you're mad. About picking kindness over cruelty, hope over despair, and connection over being alone. Tales about the complicated, messy, and beautiful experience of being human in a huge universe. Sometimes we're alone, sometimes we're connected, and we're always trying to be better than we are. No matter how advanced, no amount of artificial intelligence could ever meet that need or the human storytellers who did. Marcus started to edit, moving his red pen across the page and using the old art of turning stories into meaning. The city went on with its life outside. Inside, stories were waiting to be born. They were made by AI and then improved by humans, with love for an audience that deserved the best of both worlds.